Some performances end in roaring applause, yet when the lights go out, the artist still walks home alone. Some voices recorded timeless songs inside glittering studios, only to fade away in silent apartments, bare walls closing in around them. A singer who once brought millions to tears died in a rundown motel, discovered days too late. Another legend who once shared the stage with James Brown was found slumped on a couch, a TV remote still resting in his hand. And that's only the beginning. 23 stories of fame, heartbreak, and forgotten glory are waiting to be told. Brace yourself, what comes next may break your heart. Do you remember any of them? Leave a comment as a final goodbye. Chuck Willis, the king who wore a silent crown. A style icon with his signature turban and that smooth, velvet shoulder sway, he was the man who made post-war America move to the pulse of R&B. Songs like CC Rider and It's Too Late climbed the charts and filled jukeboxes across the country. Chuck Willis didn't just perform the blues, he revived it, reshaped it, and carried it into a new era. But no one ever imagined that the man who brought so much rhythm to the world would leave it without applause, without an audience. In April of 1958, Atlanta burned with its usual heat. Inside a small suburban apartment, Chuck lay curled on his bed, struggling to breathe. He'd been battling severe stomach pain for days, but he refused to go to the hospital, afraid it would force him to cancel his show. That night, he told his live-in girlfriend, "I just need to rest. I'll be fine tomorrow." Those were the last words she ever heard from him. Hours later, she woke to find the lights still on. Chuck was motionless. His face frozen in pain, one hand pressed against his chest. There was no scream, no frantic call for help. When the ambulance finally arrived, the diagnosis was simple and devastating: a gastric hemorrhage, massive blood loss. On the bedside table sat something even more haunting: a notebook filled with unfinished lyrics, songs the world would never hear. Nearby was an unsent letter to his mother, apologizing for not being able to buy her the house he had promised. There was no grand funeral, no public memorial. A radio station briefly announced the news, then cut straight to sports. Chuck Willis was buried quietly in a local cemetery, marked by no flashy headstone. And then, silence. He died at just 30 years old at the peak of his career. Not because he lacked talent, but because time moved on too fast and the world forgot to look back. Maybe he didn't live long enough to become a legend like Ray Charles or Sam Cooke. Or maybe the world simply didn't slow down long enough to remember him. Chuck Willis's voice once comforted the brokenhearted and guided the lost. And in the end, he became the one left behind. The real question isn't why Chuck Willis died alone. It's why so few remember that he ever lived. So if today you've ever nodded along to CC Rider without knowing the voice behind it, pause for a moment. Honor a forgotten genius. A man lost to history not because he wasn't great, but because he left too soon and too quietly. Jesse Belvin, the angel who sang his final goodbye at just 27 years old. By the time his life was cut short, Jesse's voice had already done something extraordinary. It was one of the first black voices gentle and beautiful enough to soften the frozen walls of segregation. Many believe that had Jesse lived, not Sam Cooke, would have been crowned the true king of soul. But destiny had other plans, and it all unraveled on one fateful night in Arkansas. On February 6, 1960, Jesse stepped off the stage after performing at a historic concert in Little Rock, one that shattered racial barriers by allowing black and white audiences to sit together for the first time. What the crowd didn't know was that Jesse had received multiple death threats before the show, demanding he cancel. He refused. That night, he sang the haunting ballad, "Guess Who?" as if he already knew it would be his farewell to the world. After the performance, Jesse, his wife, and his manager drove out of the city. Just 40 minutes later, their car slammed into a roadside post and flipped violently. His wife was killed instantly. Jesse, gravely injured, died shortly after. Police ruled it an accident. But later reports of brake tampering ignited quiet suspicion throughout the black community. No one was ever charged. The case was buried. Jesse's funeral was not televised. The city never apologized. And in hushed voices, people whispered, They killed him because he dared to sing for both races. Jesse Belvin died in silence. But his music never did. And every time you hear a soul record that cuts straight to the heart, remember this: Jesse Belvin helped pave that road with his voice, his courage, and a lonely death history tried to forget. Johnny Adams, the canary singing in the dark. Johnny Adams was a quiet phenomenon. To many, he was unknown. But to those who truly listened, he was unforgettable. He sang gospel, soul, jazz, and blues with a voice so rare, so haunting, that people called him the male voice that sounded almost female. Soft yet powerful. Fragile yet timeless. He never had a national hit. His name never topped the charts. But among musicians, among those who lived and breathed the music, Johnny Adams was deeply loved. What fame never gave him, respect quietly did. Still, love could not protect him from loneliness. By the late 1990s, Johnny was living alone in a small apartment in New Orleans, a place that doubled as his makeshift recording studio. It was there, in that silent space, that prostate cancer slowly took away his strength. He could no longer perform. The stage, once his sanctuary, was no longer within reach. One cold winter afternoon, a neighbor later recalled, "I heard the old music playing. Then it stopped. I thought he had fallen asleep." 3 days passed before police forced the door open. Johnny Adams was found sitting in a chair, still wearing his sweater and scarf. The CD player was still spinning. The music had ended, but no one had come. There was no suicide note. No family. No goodbye. He left this world the way he had lived in it, like a stranger who was never properly welcomed. His funeral was brief. Only a handful of local artists attended. There was no televised tribute. No statue. No replay of that angelic voice that once filled rooms with sorrow and beauty. Johnny Adams sang like an angel, but he died like a ghost. And if we still have the heart to listen, then now is the time. To remember that voice. To honor that life. And to keep Johnny Adams alive in our memory. Wright, the soul of the South, died alone in a house filled with quiet despair. Once hailed as the very voice of the American South, Wright sang with a booming, aching cry that felt like both a prayer and a confession. His voice didn't just perform soul and gospel classics like A Nickel and a Nail or Ace of Spades. It carried them straight into the hearts of those who listened. Every note sounded lived in, bruised, and painfully honest. But his life off stage was never gentle. Raised in poverty and orphaned at a young age, battled demons long before fame ever found him. Arrests for drug possession derailed his career, and though he later fought to overcome addiction and return to music, the world had already moved on. The spotlight dimmed. New recordings failed. Concerts were canceled for lack of ticket sales. Slowly, almost invisibly, Wright faded from public view. As the years passed, he grew quieter, so quiet that when neighbors noticed his front door standing slightly open for 3 days, they became uneasy and called the police. It was a damp November afternoon in 1980 when officers entered his small Memphis area home. The air was stale. The lights were off. No sound, no movement. Inside, they found Wright curled up on his sofa, eyes wide open, as if still searching for someone who never came. A plate of food sat untouched on the table. Beside it lay an old Bible, half open, its pages worn with time. He had been dead for at least 36 hours, the coroner later said. No signs of violence. No struggle. His heart had simply stopped. A neighbor across the street recalled seeing him 2 days earlier, quietly collecting his mail. He didn't speak to anyone, the neighbor said. His eyes looked like they were focused on something far away. No one knows who Wright spoke to last. There were no final songs, no farewell words. His passing was marked by a simple cremation. Only a few old friends attended, some arriving late because no one had heard the news in time. A man whose voice once shook the South left this world without an audience. No applause. No encore. Just silence and an unfinished hymn. Perhaps in death, Wright finally found rest from the loneliness, from the unrealized dreams, from a life that gave him a voice powerful enough to move millions, yet never gave him peace. In the rush of modern life, let us remember those who once lit up our souls with their songs. And let us not allow them to fade away a second time, lost to memory. ZZ Hill, the soul of soul blues, and a final journey from which he never returned. ZZ Hill never needed a chart-topping hit to earn love. His voice carried something deeper, the raw truth of soul blues, a sound that blended old-school black heartbreak with the pulse of modern city life. In an era dominated by disco lights and dance floors, ZZ Hill quietly brought the blues back home to black audiences. Songs like Love Is So Good When You're Stealing It and Down Home Blues weren't just records. They were lived experiences, stories people recognized as their own. But away from the stage, ZZ was a tired man. The road wore him down. His heart problems worsened, yet he refused to stop. Night after night, he kept performing, sometimes for crowds so small you could count them, because the music still mattered to him more than anything else. In April of 1984, after finishing a show in Texas, ZZ Hill began the drive back to Dallas. He was alone on the freeway when he lost control of his car and crashed into the median. He didn't die on impact. But by the time help arrived, his heart had already given out. The medical examiner later said that if someone had been with him, he might have survived. That's the part that hurts the most. No assistant. No family. Just ZZ Hill and an empty road. One rescue worker later recalled finding a demo tape in his pocket. Maybe he was on his way to the studio, he said. That music was never released. His funeral was small. No major stars spoke out. No headlines followed. ZZ Hill left this world the same way he lived in it. Quietly, faithfully, always giving more to the music than he ever asked for himself. He didn't chase the spotlight. He just wanted his songs to reach people's hearts. And they did. Even though he died alone, ZZ Hill will never be forgotten by those who heard themselves in his voice. If you've ever felt down home blues, share it today, because every R&B beat still carries a piece of ZZ Hill's soul. King Floyd, the king who vanished, alone in a silent apartment. In 1970, King Floyd shocked the nation with Groove Me, a record that exploded onto the charts and breathed new life into a tired R&B scene. It was youthful, infectious, impossible to ignore, a song that made America move. For a moment, Floyd was unstoppable. Then the rhythm faded. His follow-up records failed to connect, and one by one, the lights went out. King Floyd retreated from fame, slipping quietly into a reclusive life in the suburbs of New Orleans. As years passed, fans began to wonder, was he still alive, or had he already become a ghost? In 2006, the answer came. King Floyd was found dead in his rundown, one-story apartment. No family. No visitors. He had lived completely alone for the last decade of his life. No interviews, no performances, no public appearances. According to his landlord, the rent was always paid on time, but the door was never opened. "We just knew him as the old man who used to sing," he said. When Floyd hadn't been seen for a week, they finally forced the door open. What they found was haunting. The apartment held no valuables. On a small table sat an old cassette tape, handwritten with the words, "Groove Me, Demo." In the trash were prescriptions for high blood pressure and diabetes. The coroner ruled his death a stroke. No one noticed until his body began to decompose. A neighbor later shared, "I heard him singing softly every night. I never knew it was King Floyd." His death stunned those who remembered him. No one imagined a chart-topping artist would leave the world so quietly. King Floyd once made a nation dance, but somewhere along the way, he lost faith in the spotlight. He left no note, no final message, no goodbye. Only an old voice echoing from the past. Some artists don't need the spotlight forever. They just need to be heard, maybe one last time. So the next time you dance to Groove Me, remember King Floyd. A lost soul in a small room, who once moved the world to his rhythm. Jackie Moore, the quietly forgotten queen of soul. In the 1970s, Jackie Moore was more than just a singer. She was a voice that spoke directly to the hearts of black women across America. Her hit, Precious, Precious, climbed the Billboard charts and became an anthem of strength, vulnerability, and femininity during the golden rise of soul music. For a brief moment, Jackie stood tall as a symbol of resilience in an industry that rarely made room for women like her. But fame can be fleeting and cruel. After only a few short years, Jackie more slowly faded from the spotlight. Record labels turned their backs, saying she was no longer young enough, no longer marketable enough. The industry that once celebrated her voice quietly erased her name. Jackie retreated to a modest life in Jacksonville, Florida, living in near silence, remembered by few. What makes her story truly heartbreaking isn't just that she was forgotten, it's how she left this world. In the final days of her life, neighbors noticed something was wrong. The lights in Jackie's house stayed on for 3 straight days. She never stepped outside. The trash went untouched. She missed church, something she never did. Gloria, her neighbor of more than 20 years, later recalled, "I knocked and knocked, but no one answered. I could hear the radio playing an old song. It felt like Jackie was singing to me one last time." When police finally entered the house, they found Jackie more alone on her sofa. She was holding an old Bible, her eyes slightly open, as if caught in a quiet dream. There was no suicide note. No family at her side. The medical examiner said she had a history of heart disease. She likely passed away in her sleep, unnoticed for days. Beside her, in a cassette deck, was something haunting, an unreleased demo. Jackie had been recording at home, long after the world stopped asking her to sing. As if her voice still believed it mattered. As if it still hoped to be heard one last time. When Jackie Moore died, the media didn't mention her name. Radio stations said nothing. At her funeral, only a few elderly neighbors showed up. A legend faded into silence, while an entire generation had once cried, healed, and loved through her voice. Some voices carry our pain, lift our spirits, and shape our lives, then disappear as if they were never here. Let us not forget souls like Jackie Moore again. They deserve more than silence. They deserve remembrance, gratitude, and true listening. Major Lance, the Prince of Soul, died quietly in a forgotten hospital bed. Once, his voice was pure gold, the sound that defined Chicago soul. Songs like The Monkey Time and had all of America dancing through the 1960s. He shared stages with Curtis Mayfield, earning a reputation as the Prince of the Streets, loved for his warmth, his swagger, and his youthful energy that felt close to the people. But music is cruel to those who can't outrun change. As soul gave way to funk and disco, Major Lance's spotlight dimmed. Contracts disappeared. Invitations stopped coming. Alcohol slowly took hold, and the man who once filled dance floors was left behind by an industry that had already moved on. In his final years, Major lived in poverty, drifting from one boarding house to another in Atlanta. People said he survived on welfare, performing now and then in small clubs, often unrecognized, a thin, aging man standing where legends once stood. Few knew they were watching someone who had topped the charts. In September 1994, Major Lance was admitted to Grady Memorial Hospital with heart complications. He arrived alone. No wife. No children. No manager. A nurse later remembered him as gentle and soft-spoken, but always looking somewhere far away. One day, she recalled, he asked me if I knew the song, The Monkey Time. I nodded. He smiled and said, I used to sing that song, but nobody remembers it. A few days later, Major Lance died alone in his hospital bed. No one witnessed his final moments. His name was even misspelled on the death certificate, a final insult to a fading legacy. Weeks passed before a small radio station discovered he was gone and began playing his old hits. By then, the morning came too late. The man who once electrified Chicago now rested in a quiet cemetery, without a prominent headstone, without a tribute, without a mention at any awards ceremony. Major Lance didn't need a crown, but he deserved remembrance, as part of the living soul of black music. And if your heart still moves when soul music plays today, remember him. The man who made the world dance with nothing more than a smile and a looping melody. Melvin Bliss. The man who helped build hip-hop, died in its shadow. Melvin Bliss had only one hit, 1973's Synthetic Substitution. Just one record. But that record became the heartbeat of an entire culture. Its drum break was sampled hundreds of times by hip-hop legends, NWA, Public Enemy, De La Soul, and countless others. That rhythm helped shape a global movement. Yet, ironically, most people never knew his name. And Melvin himself never saw a dime from the songs that used his sound as their foundation. For more than 30 years, he lived quietly in New York City. No new albums. No interviews. No performances. Then in 2010, neighbors found him lying motionless inside his crumbling Bronx apartment. He had been dead for days. No one noticed. Police had to piece together his identity using old paperwork and medical records. "I knew he was a singer," the building's janitor said, "but I never heard him talk about success. He was quiet, always wore a hat, walked slowly, like a man carrying the weight of his past on his back." Inside that small room, people found a few handwritten notes. One line stood out. "Music is from God. I am just the messenger." Melvin Bliss wasn't honored. His death went unnoticed until a fan stumbled across his name in a city death report. And even though hundreds of millions of people had heard fragments of his music in hit rap songs, almost no one knew who he was. This is the quiet ending of a man who built the runway for generations of artists to fly. Imagine creating immortality and being forgotten. That is the pain Melvin Bliss left behind. And if you're listening to hip-hop today, chances are you're listening to what remains of him. So take a moment. Pause for the man the world forgot, but whose voice it still hears every single day. Billy Stewart. Billy Stewart. The Cadillac rolled into eternal silence. Billy Stewart was unlike any singer of his generation. With his unmistakable word-bouncing style, he didn't just sing melodies, he played them. Ballads like "Summertime" became living, breathing performances as America watched a towering black man bend syllables like notes on a horn, turning his voice into an instrument all its own. But behind the brilliance was a quiet battle. Stewart lived in constant resistance. Against obesity, against racism, and against a music industry addicted to sameness. Though he scored Billboard hits and captivated audiences, true critical recognition never came. Record executives dismissed him with a shrug, too unusual to sell. On January 17, 1970, Billy set out for a small gig in Columbia, South Carolina. He drove his Ford Thunderbird, 3 band members riding alongside him. The day was cold, the highway slick, but what followed felt like more than just bad weather. At around 2 p.m., the car suddenly veered, smashed through a guardrail, and plunged into the Neuse River. No one survived. Family members later revealed that Billy had complained about problems with the steering wheel just days earlier. A garage worker recalled noticing abnormal tire wear, but Billy's packed schedule left no time for repairs. That morning, a close friend tried calling him. Billy didn't answer. He almost never turned his phone off. 3 days later, his body was recovered. He was still wearing his performance jacket. In the trunk, police found a handwritten sheet of music, lyrics, and melodies for a song the world would never hear. Authorities ruled the crash an accident. Fans were left unconvinced. How does a living, breathing artist, so full of sound, die so suddenly, so quietly? Billy Stewart was only 32 years old. There was no televised funeral, no breaking news alert, no farewell worthy of his voice. Today, his signature phrasing survives only in the hearts of those who remember, those who still feel the echo of a man who refused to sound like anyone else. Some artists aren't born to fit the market. They're born to make the world bigger, louder, deeper. Never forget those who dare to be different, who dare to be heard, even when, in the end, they fade into silence. Barbara Lynn, the woman who picked up a guitar and slowly faded into time. In the 1960s, Barbara Lynn wasn't just another voice on the radio. She was a revolution. The first black woman to sing R&B while playing her own guitar on a national stage, she shattered expectations with every chord she struck. When "You'll Lose a Good Thing" exploded onto the charts, it carried her into television studios, glossy magazines, and into the dreams of millions of young black girls who finally saw themselves reflected in the spotlight. But fame is fragile. As the music industry shifted, Record labels chased a softer image, sweeter voices, more seductive faces. Barbara didn't fit the mold. With her Gibson guitar and raw, husky voice, she was suddenly deemed unmarketable. And just as quietly as she arrived, Barbara Lynn stepped away. She retreated to a secluded life in Beaumont, Texas, far from the stage lights. In her later years, she stopped performing altogether. The small house she lived in sat behind an old iron fence, hidden by overgrown trees. Neighbors remembered her as gentle and kind. Every morning, she watered her plants, wore cloth gloves, and walked slowly, as if she were keeping time with a rhythm only she could hear. Then, in early 2023, she stopped coming outside. Concerned, a nephew called the police. When they finally entered the house, they found Barbara Lynn had passed away 2 days earlier. There were no signs of a struggle. No medication bottles. Just an old cassette player beside her bed, softly playing her own voice. There was no grand funeral. No flood of tributes from the music world. But an old friend later revealed something haunting. Barbara always said that when she died, she wanted to hear herself sing one last time. And she did. Barbara Lynn proved that a black woman could hold a guitar, command the center of the stage, and master her own voice. So if you ever hear, "You'll lose a good thing," remember this. She was not just a singer. She was a pioneer, quietly forgotten by history, but never silenced. Nolan Porter was a drifter in the music world. A man who poured his soul into one final record and quietly disappeared. His name never became mainstream, but to the Northern Soul faithful in the UK and underground music lovers across the US, Nolan Porter was pure gold. His song, Keep On Keeping On, driven by raw funk grooves and unbreakable, defiant lyrics, became more than just a track. It was a spiritual awakening, a quiet anthem of survival for a young black generation searching for hope. Yet Nolan's life behind the music was anything but easy. Though critics respected him deeply, record labels kept turning him away. Too artistic, they said, not commercial enough. So he survived the only way he could, playing small gigs, teaching music classes, and ghostwriting lyrics for other artists who would go on to receive the recognition he never did. In 2021, Nolan was diagnosed with severe kidney failure. He refused costly treatments, choosing instead to live out his days in a modest rented room in Van Nuys, California. His landlord later recalled how Nolan grew weaker by the day, yet every morning, without fail, he would sing. Once, the landlord overheard him recording himself. It didn't sound like a demo. It sounded like a farewell. Like a man preserving his final words in melody. On the evening of July 30th, Nolan sent an email to a close friend. The subject line read, "Finally." No one opened it. 2 days later, a strange smell prompted the motel manager to unlock the door. Inside, they found Nolan slumped beside his half-open laptop. The screen was still glowing, frozen on a recording interface. Headphones still rested on his ears. The final track was unfinished. There were no headlines. No breaking news alerts. No public tributes. Just a handful of loyal fans who later created a small fan page to keep his music alive. For one of them, Nolan's songs had been the reason they survived a miserable youth. Nolan Porter died alone. But his voice didn't. It still echoes in the hearts of those who heard themselves in his music. Sometimes, you don't need fame to live forever. Sometimes, touching just one soul is enough. And this is only one story. There are 11 more, each even more devastating than the last. So before we go any further, ask yourself, did they really die alone? Or did the music industry that once applauded them quietly turn its back? Who do you think is truly to blame? Don Covay was the man who wrote hits for the world, then quietly vanished into the current of life. A rare and undeniable talent, Covay wasn't just a singer, he was a master songwriter who helped shape the sound of soul music. He penned classics for legends like Aretha Franklin and Wilson Pickett, and his song, Chain of Fools, remains an immortal anthem echoing through generations. Yet behind the curtain, Don Covay lived a very different story. While others stood in the spotlight, he remained in the shadows, overshadowed by the very stars he helped make famous. His life was marked by struggle. He battled severe diabetes, suffered a devastating stroke in 1992, and slowly lost his ability to perform, the one thing that once gave his life meaning. Don Covay's final days were spent in a New York nursing home, without music, without family, without visitors. One nurse later recalled that on his last night, he asked to hear his very first recording one more time. He sat quietly, saying nothing, gently nodding his head to the rhythm. By morning he was gone. They say he died peacefully in his sleep. But no artist posted a tribute. No headlines broke the news. Just a few brief lines in the paper, passing by like an old memory no one stopped to read. Don Covay gave the world unforgettable songs, yet he left it as if he had never been here. Sometimes, the people who write the light for others to shine are the ones history forgets. Remember Don Covay, not as a footnote, but as a silent genius who lived in the dark and brought light to countless hearts. Doris Troy, the angelic voice the world slowly stopped hearing. Doris Troy once made the world look up with Just One Look, a song so powerful it etched her voice into the golden dream of 1960s soul pop. Critics called her voice heavenly, pure, aching, unforgettable. She shared creative space with legends like the Rolling Stones, George Harrison, and even Pink Floyd. For a moment, she stood where music history was being written. But the spotlight doesn't last forever. As the years passed and new records stopped coming, Doris faded from public memory. Younger audiences never learned her name. She withdrew from the world, living quietly in a small Las Vegas apartment, far from the stages that once echoed her voice. In February 2004, neighbors noticed something was wrong. Doris hadn't stepped out to take her trash as she always did. Knocks on her door went unanswered. When police finally entered the apartment, they found her alone on the sofa, eyes still open, an old record spinning in the background. No one had been there. No one had known. No one had come in time. A neighbor later said, "I used to hear her singing softly in her room." But that week, there was only silence. Doris Troy died from complications of diabetes and kidney failure. Yet what breaks the heart most is not how she died, but how quietly. A woman who once sang for the entire world left it unheard. Her final audience was an empty room, listening like her songs once did, faithfully and alone. Just one look had been enough to captivate millions. And just one long moment of forgetting was enough for a soul to fade away in silence. Arthur Alexander, the great teacher the world somehow forgot. Arthur Alexander was a musical anomaly, a quiet force hiding in plain sight. He remains the only black singer ever covered by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and Bob Dylan, a distinction so rare it should have guaranteed immortality. Songs like Anna and You Better Move On didn't just chart, they reshaped the emotional language of early rock music in the 1960s. Yet behind the influence was a life marked by struggle and silent heartbreak. After a string of commercial disappointments, Arthur faded from the spotlight, leaving the music world behind to work as a pharmaceutical delivery driver, carrying medicine for others while his own dreams slowly bled away. In 1993, after 2 decades of waiting, Arthur finally believed his moment had returned. He signed with a small label and stepped back into the studio to record a new album, his long-delayed second chance. But fate was cruel. Just days after the first recording session, Arthur collapsed at home with severe chest pains. A neighbor called for help, but it came too late. He died of a heart attack, never living to see the rebirth he had hoped for 20 long years. Arthur thought the world had forgotten him, a former colleague once said. I think he died feeling like he was no longer needed. The media barely noticed. No grand headlines. No major tributes. Only a handful of soul fans, too late, wrote quiet goodbyes. Arthur Alexander was a musical soul whose voice shaped legends, yet whose name faded into silence. And perhaps the most heartbreaking truth isn't death itself, but leaving this world believing you were already forgotten. Syl Johnson, the last warrior to fall in an era that had stopped listening. Syl Johnson wasn't just a musician, he was a fighter, in music and in society. He gave us soul and funk classics like Different Strokes and Is It Because I'm Black? Songs that didn't just entertain, but challenged America to look in the mirror. Beyond the studio, Syl took on white artists in court, fighting plagiarism, defending copyright, and standing up for black dignity when few dared to do so. Yet despite his influence, Syl Johnson remained an underground legend. He never received the recognition granted to many of his peers. In February 2022, only days after the heartbreaking loss of his daughter, Syl Johnson quietly slipped away from this world. He died alone in his old Chicago home, surrounded by vinyl records, dusty tapes, and unfinished songs, echoes of a lifetime of truth-telling. A close friend later revealed Syl felt out of place in modern times. Soul music, he said, no longer mattered. Lyrics with meaning had been replaced by noise. When the maid arrived that morning to bring him breakfast, she found him lifeless. The television was still on, playing in the background, modern rap videos. His name never mentioned. His legacy unseen. Syl Johnson spent his life fighting to be heard. In the end, he became a man left behind by the times. An artist who used music to protest, to love, to demand dignity. No one heard his final song. But some voices don't fade, they become the foundation of history. Let's keep Syl Johnson's memory alive. Because if we forget the ones who stood up for justice, who will be left to stand up for us? Betty Wright. A powerful voice that once filled arenas, now fading into silence in an empty room. Betty Wright wasn't just a soul singer, she was a feminist force in music. With Clean Up Woman, she shattered stereotypes and took control of the stage while still a teenager, commanding respect in an industry that rarely gave it to young black women. But behind the spotlight was a quiet battle no audience ever saw. Even as honors came late in her career, Betty was privately fighting cancer. She lived her final years away from public eyes, choosing privacy over sympathy. Few people knew just how close the end truly was. In May 2020, her family revealed that Betty no longer wanted visitors. She asked for all electronic devices to be removed from her room. "I just want to listen to the wind," she said, "and sing softly to myself." That morning, a nurse entered the room and found her lying on her side, eyes closed, a gentle smile on her face. No machines. No applause. No spotlight. Only memories. Betty Wright left this world the same way she lived in it. Strong, private, and on her own terms. And yet the question lingers. Why did a woman who once topped the charts leave so quietly? Remember her not only for the songs that define generations, but for the courage it took to remain herself until the very end. David Ruffin, the wanderer with a once-in-a-generation voice. He was the soul of the Temptations, the man whose vocals turned "My Girl" into an eternal love song. But behind the spotlight, the applause faded into shadows. Addiction took hold. Rebellion followed. And eventually, he was pushed out of the very group he helped make legendary. After that, David drifted from city to city like a ghost of his former self, singing unannounced in small bars, wearing worn-out suits, never without his sunglasses, as if hiding memories too painful to face. In late May of 1991, he checked into a cheap motel in Philadelphia. No luggage. No entourage. He told the receptionist he only needed a small room, for one night. The next morning, housekeeping found him unconscious. He was later pronounced dead from a fatal drug overdose. No one knew who he'd been with. He carried no identification. It wasn't until the police took his fingerprints that the truth emerged. This unknown man was David Ruffin, the legendary voice that once moved millions. David Ruffin died alone, as a nobody. But his voice didn't die. And that may be the most painful part of all. A soul that touched the hearts of millions had no one beside him at the end. Live your life so that when you close your eyes for the last time, at least one person remembers that you once made them smile. Bobby Womack was a storyteller who slowly lost his voice in the long, lonely night. One of soul music's greatest narrators, he once moved audiences to tears with love songs like, "If You Think You're Lonely Now." His voice carried heartbreak so real it felt personal. But behind the music was a life marked by tragedy, addiction, the loss of a child, broken marriages, and the cruel fade of Alzheimer's. Even in old age, Bobby kept performing. His memory was slipping, his voice no longer what it once was, yet his spirit refused to quit. In 2014, Inside his Los Angeles apartment, Bobby recorded himself. He was afraid of forgetting who he was. An assistant recalled, "Every day he would say, 'I am Bobby. I lived. I loved.'" That night, he struggled to breathe but refused to call an ambulance. By morning, he collapsed in bed, eyes open, lips trembling, as if he were still in the middle of telling one last story. Bobby Womack died somewhere between memory and the present. No crowd. No spotlight. No music playing in the background, only the truth. The greatest storytellers often carry a sadness no one else can speak. Cherish those who listen to you, because one day, you may need someone to tell your story. Donny Hathaway. A brilliant soul who fell from a balcony, and no one could save him. Donny Hathaway was a musical genius, gifted beyond measure, yet tormented by schizophrenia. His love songs, "A Song for You," "This Christmas," remain timeless treasures, echoes of tenderness that still move the world. But behind the beauty of his music, his mind was never quiet. Voices followed him, haunted him, pulling him into darkness he fought against every single day. He tried. He fought. He held on as long as he could. On January 13, 1979, Donny was invited back into the studio. Friends said he was joyful that day, lighter than he'd been in a long time. He said he could hear the music clearly again. The whispers were gone. For a moment, it felt like peace had finally found him. But just hours later, Donny Hathaway was found dead beneath the balcony of the Essex House Hotel in New York City. Police ruled it a suicide. No note. No warning. Only the sound of the wind, and a silence that has never truly left the music world. Donny Hathaway fell like a star from the sky. No goodbye. No final bow. Yet every time his music plays, his soul feels reborn. And perhaps the most haunting part of his story isn't how he died, but how little we understood him while he was still here. So listen closely when someone sings from the heart. Because sometimes, a beautiful song is not just music, it's a final cry for help. Sam Cooke. The King of Soul didn't fade away in glory, he died in blood, confusion, and unanswered questions. Sam Cooke wasn't just a musical legend, he was a powerful voice in the civil rights movement, a man who dared to demand equality in a time that punished those who spoke too loudly. But in December 1964, everything he built was suddenly thrown into doubt. One late night, Sam Cooke was shot and killed inside a rundown motel in Los Angeles. The motel manager claimed he attacked her while desperately searching for a woman he believed had been kidnapped. That was the official story. Yet nothing about that night made sense. His clothes were torn. His money was gone. No thorough, independent investigation ever followed. A bartender who saw him earlier that evening said Sam seemed troubled, weighed down by something far heavier than a hangover. Sam Cooke died alone, his legacy clouded by scandal instead of honor. And decades later, the question still refuses to disappear. Was his death the result of a tragic misunderstanding? Or was it the price he paid for standing up for black rights when powerful people wanted him silent? Otis Redding. A man who soared to the highest heights, only to fall into icy silence. Otis Redding had just finished recording "Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay" when he boarded the flight that would seal his fate. At only 26 years old, he wasn't just a rising star, he was the very heartbeat of modern R&B and soul. On December 10, 1967, in heavy fog, his small plane went down in Lake Monona. 8 lives were lost. Only one person survived. To this day, no one knows exactly what went wrong. A gas station attendant near the airport later recalled Otis stopping by for coffee. Sitting alone in his car, he sang softly to himself. There was something hauntingly calm about him, as if, somehow, he already knew this would be the last time. Otis Redding died before his most revolutionary song ever reached the world. When "Dock of the Bay" was finally released, he was already resting beneath the cold water. Sometimes, the brightest souls burn the fastest. Otis didn't just leave behind timeless music. He left behind a silence, a space in soul music that has never truly been filled. Marvin Gaye. A man who preached love, harmony, and peace to the world, yet met his end at the hands of his own father. Marvin Gaye wasn't just a singer. He was the sound of tenderness, desire, and hope for a gentler world. But behind the velvet voice lived a deeply wounded soul, shaped by a childhood marked by violence, years of addiction, and an aching loneliness that fame could never heal. On April 1, 1984, inside a modest home in Los Angeles, a heated argument erupted between Marvin and his father, Pastor Marvin Gaye Sr. Less than a minute later, 2 gunshots shattered the silence. Marvin collapsed to the floor. He was dead, shot by the man who gave him life. He was only 44 years old, 1 day away from his birthday. A neighbor later recalled, "I heard screaming, then silence, then his mother crying." Marvin didn't die because of the world. He didn't die because of his enemies. He died because of the person who should have loved him the most. His death is more than a personal tragedy. It is a haunting reminder of the invisible wounds that exist inside families, and the painful truth that love, when mixed with unresolved pain, isn't always enough to save the ones who need it most. Because sometimes, the smallest acts of understanding are the most precious gifts a lonely soul could ever receive. Thank you for staying with us through this heartbreaking journey. If these stories moved you, please like and share this video, and leave a comment about the artist who touched your heart the most. Every interaction is a tribute, a way to keep their legacy alive, forever.